Thank you, Brad, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Tony Katsabaris, and I have the pleasure of running the government and education business for Adobe across Asia. The agricultural revolution, the industrial revolution, the technology revolution. Each wave of innovation that we've seen on this planet over the last 300 years has demanded a change of inhuman labour in the role that it plays within those industries and the skills that are fit for purpose in its current status. The video that we played we chose deliberately because I look at just a small example of how quickly things change and the impact upon human labour. This device really wasn't used in anger up until about 2009. Pre that, we actually used it as a phone. Now, we probably use it the least amount to talk to people. I look at this through the lens of Adobe and the impact that it's had on employment. So our tools create some amazing content, and that's why we showed the video. What we're doing every day with these devices is creating insatiable demand for content at a global scale, the volume and scale of which we've never seen. In this country alone, in the last 10 years, content creation jobs have increased by about 10,000. So 10,000 new jobs. There are people in every enterprise in this country that are working on creating content so that people can consume on these devices. This is just one example of how quickly things can change. So off the back of those opening remarks, it is my pleasure to be your facilitator for the next 20 to 25 minutes. This session will explore the relationship between the machine, or Skynet for those with a conspiracy theory bent, and human labour. To set this up, it is a pleasure to introduce Gavin, Claire and Cameron, who will be your esteemed panellists today. And before I throw to the floor for questions to test them, I'd like to ask for opening remarks from our panellists, and I think it's only fitting that we start with Gavin. So.
Oh, great, thanks, Tony. I feel like I'm at Senate estimates here, but less intimidating. At least I'm less likely to get into trouble. But yeah, it's a really good question and a relevant question, actually. And I mean, I'm glad you sort of mentioned the various industrial revolutions that have happened, because they're all sort of relevant. But it's clear the revolution we're in today is far more dramatic and far-reaching, and it's sheer pace of change. I mean, you know, you mentioned phones. I mean, there's 27 billion connected devices today, and as you sit here today, organisations are collecting information on you without you knowing it. They know you're here, they know how active you are, and who knows, your Fitbits might be chatting to each other, then they can kind of work out whose heart rate is up and whose heart rate is down. So it's quite extraordinary, the world we live in. I mean, McKinsey's a recent thing that came out said the rate of change is 10 times that of previous sort of industrial revolutions. So it's just the pace and the reach of change, I think, is a key factor. Stephen Hawkins and the late Stephen Hawking and Elon Musk both have, you know, said that they think potentially with the growth in artificial intelligence, it's the end of the world if we don't think about it, and it's quite a serious sort of topic and raises a whole lot of other issues for another day around potential dilemmas that we need to deal and face into as humans, thinking about the opportunities but also the many threats that digital revolution is creating for us. Back to jobs though, no, I don't think, in fact, if you Google my job, it says I won't be replaced by a robot, which is cool. There's actually a website you can go on and say, will my job be replaced? So check it out. But I'm safe. I'm safe for the short term. No, it's more about augmentation, you know, and I might be taking a slightly simplistic view. I mean, I spent decades in the banking industry, and all through the ages there's been a high degree of automation. And what you've seen is that, yeah, some tasks get replaced, and indeed at times some jobs get replaced, but new ones get created. The really simple one for me to illustrate it is we thought about our channel management strategy, all the inbound calls that our operators were having to deal with for simple service type requests, transaction type requests, being able to you know, build capability that customers could do that themselves, meant it freed up time for those contact centre staff to be able to do outbound calling and deal with those more complex issues and more value add. So it's kind of more a shift in kind of the nature of the tasks. That said though, there will be examples where jobs will get replaced. So I was in Singapore recently, and there's a whole lot of automation going on around the trucks now. They're driverless trucks, loading containers, shipping containers and everything else. Those drivers no longer have a job. So at a micro level, jobs do get lost, but at a kind of more macro level, new jobs do get created, and maybe the art is thinking about those individuals that do get impacted, what industry and companies' response is to reskilling that workforce so they can remain productively employed. That's probably longer than 2 minutes, Tony.
I will take it. I'm not sure what it was, but it felt right. So
Okay.
You'd be good at Senate estimates, mate.
So on that note, Claire, if I could ask for your comments, please.
I would certainly agree with what Gavin has said. Our own research in Data 61 can tell us both about the kinds of skills that we are seeing more demand for over time, and it very much reiterates, I think, what Andrew Charlton said this morning, which is that the more that we work with technology and via technology to deliver our work, the more the demand is for the people skills, which complement what the technology can do. So the fastest rate of growth is not in traditional STEM skills. Physics skills are actually showing a decreased rate of growth over time. Generic skills, such as the ability to work with a computer or the ability to work with data and numbers, are important, but actually the skills that are most important, that are growing across a wide range of jobs, are things like active listening, negotiation skills, and the ability to communicate orally, and to make sense of complex problems, because even in the medium term, technology is not expected to be able to build relationships with people, to make them feel understood, and to help somebody who's got a very ill-defined problem find out what the nature of the issue is for them and what the right kind of solution is, and then make them feel confident in that solution. The other reason why we're seeing these kinds of skills in more demand that perhaps we aren't hearing as much about is the demographic change in our population, which, the rapid ageing of our population, which means that there is ever-increasing demand for aged care, for healthcare, the technology changes which will create increased demand for education. So all those services require working with people. And whilst a job such as a teacher will certainly be changed by technology, it will not be displaced by technology. So, for example, we can use fantastic online content, we can use simulations to help teachers provide very standard content much more efficiently and perhaps much more engagingly for the students and improve learning outcomes that way. But you can't leave a student on their own with the technology. We can look at the low completion rates from the massive open online courses as evidence that online alone doesn't work. So a teacher will need slightly different skill sets. They don't have to keep delivering the same content, but they do need to use the data that technology provides on how well a student's going in the classroom, which elements they're struggling with, when they need support. And I think perhaps something we aren't hearing enough about is the accountability of another human being, which you can't get from working with a computer. So those qualities, high levels of skills, but I think the last thing I want to say is that the potential of technology is one thing, even that we argue on. Is it 9% of jobs that will be disrupted or 47% of jobs? But we have a lot of important social choices which will determine how much of that potential flows through. What infrastructure are we going to invest in? What regulation around self-driving trucks are we going to adopt? And which technology do we uptake and which do we not? And then within those social choices, there's the question around how we support the people who are going to be disrupted, and that's the people in very routine and rule-based jobs. The occupational group that is largest in our economy is also at very high risk of being displaced, and that's people doing very basic sales assistant roles. You can go online to get your shopping done. You can go to a self-service checkout. Vending machines are selling more and more different things. That occupational group is at high risk. But we can help people with things like that Telstra My Career app or platform, which can tell you you've got 4 out of 5 of the skill sets for the new jobs where there is high demand. And then we have to design our educational systems so that people can tweak that skill set, identify their new pathway, and maybe update their digital educational passport so that they can make those transitions more efficiently in the future, because more people will need to make them. And then as individuals, the important choice, I think, is not to wait passively, not to feel threatened by what's coming on the horizon, because people can do better and often do much better out of this disruption. If you're in a role where the technology takes away the routine aspect of the job, it makes you more efficient and more productive, it allows you to add value in new ways, you can get paid more. Australia is a very high-cost labour force, and we need to be embracing what we can do with technology to be more efficient, to be more productive, to add value, so that we can continue to prosper. So that's our choice as individuals.
Very good.
Claire, thank you for those opening insights, and I'll tap into both of you for a sec around, if I look at what Singapore are doing and how they're crossing upskilling aged skills and making them more relevant and appropriate for the modern workplace, I think it talks to some of what you've mentioned. Cameron, if I could ask for your opening comments and thoughts.
I won't go over some old ground, but what I will just pick up on is this concept of augmentation and skills. And, we will talk in a moment a bit more about the risk issues and concerns that are emerging. However, what is becoming blatantly clear for those organisations that are working through the transition is that those that think about augmentation in the concept of AI being co-workers and the organisational structure in the future consisting of automated assistants, cognitive assistants and AI advisors and people rapidly realise the benefits a lot quicker than just thinking about technology. Because at the end of the day, those 3 new workers will do a significant amount of the work. And as was mentioned before, the work fundamentally is not changing. The way we do it is, and where we redeploy that capacity is a choice that we need to work through and make. If we think about benefits realisation of the transition, 3 key things that we're seeing for organisations that are going through this. They're looking at the redesign of work, the redesign of jobs, and the alignment of their people absolutely concurrently. And they're operating significantly different to what they did 5 years ago. It's a cognitive business model, for lack of a better word, that has new policies, new processes, new capability, new technology, new governance structures that are actually going to unlock the benefits of this transition over time. There is an individual responsibility for every one of us, not just leadership, but every one of the people in our workforces. And it's what we call Q cubed. In the past, we used to think about EQ and IQ. Well, there's the third Q now is TQ, and that is that technology quotient. If you're in a job, you will be working with automated assistants and cognitive assistants and AI advisors. You will be asked to train an AI assistant in the future. Your job will be about interacting and extracting insights and understanding and advice from those AI assistants. And getting really clear that TQ is the differentiator that will accelerate the transition. But I will also say a key starting point, however, the lack of common understanding in terms of what the impacts are, when the impacts will arrive, the scale of those impacts, how we actually control what AI assistants do and what we give them in our workforces at the senior leadership and the management level is going to be a major constraint, and it will lead to a range, and has led to a range of misfires that don't help the debate around what should be a really positive transition in just the way that we live our lives and we go to work and work.
Well, thank you, TQ. I'll be taking that on board and running with that in terms of my dialogue. It's probably Deloitte proprietary, but we'll work that out behind the scenes.
We will trademark it now, though.
Okay, good. All right, well, you've heard from the crew. You saw from the original format from panel 1 that it's now your turn to put them to the test. If I could ask you to raise your hand, stand and state your name and your organisation.
Darren Harvey, CTO Group. Just maybe for Cameron, There's been a sort of prevalence for new jobs like organisational psychology, etc. Do you see that being extended to augment the human factor quite deliberately within organisations to be less organisational psychology and more people working on the ground to make sure that human factor and the ethics and all of the control aspects that we need to apply?
Yeah, so I think there's a lot of thinking that is going into how we administer and apply, design, train, develop AI assistants and support people. One thing I will say, however, is that I think that a lot of organisations are quickly moving away from having and saying, well, hang on, helping us get ready is that person's job. Right? You know, in the future, the marketing grad you get, the HR grad you get, the finance grad you get should be familiar and comfortable when they graduate of having and being given an AI assistant or an AI advisor the third day that they start with an organisation, and that will be their buddy as they move forward within their natural working life. Admittedly, you know, we will start with a central body that is responsible for developing and designing a policy, but you know, the reality is that you should be recruiting people with those skills, and that really calls into question our education system and is it producing future-ready individuals really right now and today. And I debate that, you know, that they've got the passion, they've got the enthusiasm, they've got the smarts, they've got the subject matter expertise, but they don't have that TQ yet.
And I think part of the problem there is that the change is happening faster than people can graduate.
Yeah.
You know, in certain sectors, best practice use of technology has changed within the 3 years of the degree.
Yeah.
So I think there isn't enough being said around how we change our model for delivering education to reflect this kind of thing. And I think there's an opportunity here with digital technology to make a bit more porousness between where we're educated and where we're working, that there can be, through digital platforms, much more efficient methods of delivering education while you're working, of giving students experience of the work environment through matching systems. So I think that's one of the really important implications of this, is efficient, agile education.
Gavin?
Yeah, my take on it is that we're finally talking about change management. You know, all through the ages, as life has changed for us as individuals and in our workforce, as things got automated or there's a new product get launched or a new way or new regulation that you have to comply with, etc., you know, the role of that organisation and the management team and the leadership group is to think about how do we lead our staff through that change and equip them to cope with the change and to be productive and embrace it. And so I think we're talking about exactly the same thing. I think what is different this time, though, is the rate of change, you know, and the sheer pace of it. That said, though, I don't think we should underestimate the ability of us as humans to adapt. I mean, we all have a virtual assistant already. Siri, phone this person, phone that person, do this, do that. You know, in a way, I mean, just the way in our kind of just lives, just generally, this stuff is, we kind of absorbing it without consciously realising we are. You know, so.
Although it's interesting because Australians as householders are great at uptake of technology, but as business owners, not so good.
Yeah.
So how do we bring that culture over?
Yeah, and that's sort of a kind of slightly different sort of issue or question. Is I know a lot of businesses are grappling with this whole thing around disruption, which is more around how do we have the right conversation the right way. You know, the so what now what in terms of how do we adjust, how do we adapt to stay relevant and competitive.
So as you're talking, I'm thinking about Swinburne University, who we've been working with the last 3 years, and change management coupled with is the curriculum relevant and providing modern workforce skills. It's taken them so they realised that they need to create a better marketing program so that they can prepare the graduates for the modern workplace. It took them 2.5 years to go through their change management process of what is the curriculum, the governance boards to approve it, test it, and then roll it out. So Yeah, I think
And
it
that's
touches
true
on all
for
three.
any government-funded training in Australia. Changes take years
Yeah.
because of the national accreditation system.
Oh, nice opener, sir. Do we have a following bid and offer?
Kieran Mott from Veritech.
Hi, Kieran.
We talk about AI being a driver of innovation and efficiency, but there's not a lot of dialogue about technology driving creativity. I'd like to get some of the views from the panellists about ways that they're seeing creativity being driven from technology enhancements rather than just being more efficient and more effective during that process.
Yeah. Kieran, nice to see you. Kieran runs a very successful business here in Canberra, so I had the good fortune of going out and seeing it, so congratulations, Kieran. Yeah, I think to your point, I mean, I sort of used the phrase the other day, I think we're only limited by the extent of our imagination, you know, and kind of imagining, you know, what technology can enable in terms of outcomes or better outcomes. I mean, health is a good one, and it's kind of relevant for me because, you know, the other day I had a thing cut out of my forehead. You know, and it's kind of one of those sort of low-grade melanoma, not a melanoma, skin cancer things. But yeah, you know, the traditional model is I went and saw the skin specialist and he kind of took a microscope and kind of went all over, you know, and said, oh, that's got to come out, cut it out, send it away for testing and that. And we know this technology exists already, but, you know, these huge databases now where, you know, ultimately all that will just be automated, you know, and the ability to scan someone's skin and match every single mole and blemish and everything else against a worldwide database of every single variant and type of that, and to more accurately diagnose and say, well, that one really, we know with a lot greater confidence that that might cause some potential issues and therefore something needs to be done about it. So well, that's just one small example, but I think every single industry, both, you know, government and private sector, I think the opportunities are limitless. I think it's only our imagination or lack of, perhaps, or risk-taking culture, not wanting to try new things that maybe get in the way of that sort of source of innovation.
For me, yes, it's about efficiency, but I also think it's a lot about finding new ways of adding value. And there are so many examples of that, such as, you know, the way artists are now using crowdsourcing to get funding for their work. But to go back to the employment domain, one of the exciting things we've been trialling ourselves is looking at people's social media profile, and from the kinds of things that people like, the kinds of things they talk about, you can actually estimate where they stand on a lot of personality measures. We have also found that when you look at the top 100 software engineers, the top 100 optometrists, they have different profiles in their social media, reliably, consistently different profiles. So now you can take a student and say, did you know that your social media profile looks like that of a successful software engineer and, you know, maybe 10 other professional groups? That's a new way of helping people find a pathway, which is incredibly exciting.
Cameron?
Look, not much further to add there. You know, just apart from the realities that, you know, the use of AI and its ability to, you know, process and analyse structured and unstructured data and the speed of which it can do that, and feed that in through, you know, swipe, touch and voice into people so that they can spend more time focusing upon the things that are going to add value and the things that are not, is absolutely staggering. And, you know, a lot of organisations now are actually using that to start to inform transformation and reform programs so that they're not, you know, forgetting about the last 10 years worth of transformation and reforms that went well and didn't go well. And they're feeding that into teams and people to enable them to be creative.
Okay, I'm thinking STEM, I'm thinking STEAM, I'm thinking back at work where we talk about art and science and, you know, how do you bring together artificial intelligence and data to predict, but, you know, there's still a requirement for content to stir emotion and connection, so.
Yeah. Question?
Sorry? Yeah.
Grant Nicholson from the Australian Public Service Commission. Can you just tell me how you think the value assessment might work with humans compared to artificial intelligence systems, where when we heard earlier that you might have 80% of your business being handled by an AI system and only 20% by the human who's providing that higher quality interaction. from a business point of view, it looks like all your revenue is coming from this one and relatively little is coming from that one. How do you balance that value proposition?
Well,
I'm not an economist.
Yeah, good question. I don't think it's as binary as that. So why do I say that? Because I think you've got to look at them as a complete kind of, what do I call it, entity or thing, in terms of service delivery. It's the human element augmenting, or the technology augmenting the human element. So the best business example I can give you would be, it's maybe a bit on the nose at the moment, banking. But, a lot of the really simple tasks, have been automated. And in a sense, to a degree, artificial intelligence. A lot of simple loans are kind of just credit decisioning tools are used now to make credit decisions and all of that. And the more complex ones are referred. The more complex structured finance deals require, a high degree of human interaction. And so I don't think it's kind of either or. There's value in both of those. I think the economic view is that obviously the lower you can drive down your cost of providing a product or a service and improve your margins, that's kind of good for business. But I don't think you can ever sort of look at that discretely from the human element and where the complexity side sits. And I'll use Uber, then I'll finish. Like Uber is a sort of an amazing example that often gets used because, what it's done, it's used an ecosystem to connect supply and demand, someone who wants to get somewhere and someone's prepared to drive them somewhere. And it makes payment easy and you can track and rates and blah, blah. There's still the human element though in that. You could say in the future, driverless cars, I won't get in one. But I don't know. My view is I think that human element is still a huge driver of economic value, if that's your question.
And maybe, I love a book called The Zero Marginal Cost Society, which basically says we'll be able to provide more. And a really good example of that is in financial advice.
Yeah.
Currently, the people who need financial advice the most can't afford to pay for a financial advisor. But a robo-advisor can provide automated advice. And now you can give that to a lot more people who can really benefit from it. So you're delivering much more as well.
Yeah, and we're not seeing anyone sort of segment based on the values being created by our AI assistants and not by our humans. There is a lot about error rates, quality control, compliance, speed, efficiency, overall productivity of the workforce, of automated assistants, cognitive assistants, AI advisors and people working together. But certainly in terms of value as classified by customer experience or community or experience or citizen experience, the redeployment of that capacity to those in need most to either grow profits or provide better service for those that need it or more service to those that need it is really where the value is coming from. We're very rarely seeing organisations just, cut huge amounts of their workforce out without redeploying significant amount of their of that excess capacity back to other high value tasks and activities that they seem as a priority.
Thank you, Cameron. I think our last question.
So, Adna Oliskuk from Department of Industry, Innovation and Science. My question is about us encouraging in younger people investing some of the softer skills. But on that a little bit, if we are doing that, do we then need to start looking into measuring success by using some other matrices instead of efficiency and productivity? Do we need to start looking into efficacy? Do we need to start looking into measuring by looking at creativity and innovation and so on? And if so, if we are looking at doing that, what is your view on how to move into that space?
So I was going to say, could you just repeat the question again? Just your microphone at the start.
Oh, sorry. So I'm interested in hearing your view on if we are moving into encouraging people to getting some of those softer skills in communications and so on. Do we then need to start looking at on how we measure success by starting looking at more metrics other than productivity and efficiency and so on? Like, how do we measure the success of creativity? How do we measure innovation and that kind of things?
Yeah, I think the answer is absolutely on that one. That there's, the shift away. One of the things you've got to remember is that we can talk in generalisations around creativity and things. You actually don't want every employee to be the uber creative, because there's a lot of jobs that just need to do work, and there are times within their working day that they do need to be creative. So a lot of the measurement mechanisms, probably won't change a great deal, just like job families and structures won't change. However, the emphasis on certain things should get enhanced because it's more valued by the organisation. Innovation is going to be a big one, as too is creativity. But if you look at someone like, I don't know if there's anyone from Google here, but they reward failure. 99.9% of the things they do don't get up and don't work. And that's good, because that 0.1% of things that do have a huge global impact.
I too would agree. I think we have to give much more focus on how to measure soft skills. And I think we're seeing some interesting approaches. I've heard that PricewaterhouseCoopers no longer looks at people's resumes until they've gone through a game, essentially a kind of realistic job preview where they have to deal with a problem and show how they'd respond to it. And in the process, they have to illustrate the creativity, the problem solving, the information searching. I'm not sure how they get at teamwork, but there are systems that we can begin to use to understand people's capability. And we can also go through and trawl through, what kind of jobs has this person already done? What do we know about the requirement for those soft or people skills in that kind of job? And begin to develop more reliable assessments of that type of skill.
Yeah, not surprising. I agree as well. I think it would be great if we had more anthropologists in the world. I think focusing on the human aspect of things, particularly in this world of mass digitisation, is becoming more and more important. I don't think any of these things are mutually exclusive, though. A pathway for a business to grow its revenues and improve its productivities requires a level of imagination, and requires innovation, requires creativity to think about new business models, how you adapt to disruption and all of that. But those softer skills, I've got two daughters, one's just finished school, another one going through school, and you get caught up in this whole ATAR thing around what score they need to get. And I keep coming back and I remind the girls, I say, what will get you further in life is your ability to interact with others. Yes, you need to be driven, and yes, you need to have a degree of intellect, whatever your aptitude is or whatever your interests are. But actually what's most important in life is, can you relate to others? And can you be human in a digital world? That might get you further.
So on that note, I'll wrap that segment up with, I think we are seeing a renaissance of the creative. How? What are the signs? I think earlier today we had the Chief Citizen Experience Officer from DHS. Commercial and government are becoming experience-led businesses now. So I think we're seeing a shift from efficiency and process to, how do I create some wow out there and differentiate myself, either as a government service or a commercial provider. 4 words to wrap it up: technology, people, opportunity, or risk. I'll leave it with you to ponder. If you could thank my panel for their lovely insights and making their time available. Thank you.